What if your mind is full, but your soul is starving and you don't even know it? A mind full of texts, a heart empty of reality, O seeker of truth. Listen carefully, for not every sound becomes meaning, and not every meaning becomes awakening. Many people carry libraries in their minds, but deserts in their hearts. They speak of God without ever tasting a single drop of His nearness. They quote the saints without ever walking one step on their path. They teach the law, yet they remain strangers to the one for whom the law was revealed. Remember, the mind collects, but the heart reflects. The mind stores information, but the heart unveils the real. You can memorize 1,000 texts, and still remain blind to the one truth written in the fabric of your own soul. Knowledge without presence is a veil. Knowledge with presence becomes a window. The real is not reached through accumulated words, but through a surrendered heart. There are those who speak of love as if they have measured its depth. They talk of surrender as if they have tasted its sweetness. They describe fana as if they have disappeared. Yet their egos sit proudly on the throne of their intellect. They are filled with texts, but empty of experience. They carry the map yet refuse to travel. They hold the key, but never open the door. Knowledge collected by the mind becomes weight, but knowledge absorbed by the heart becomes light. And this truth unfolds quietly inside the seeker, who begins to notice that memorized words rarely change a person, while lived understanding transforms them from the inside out. The mind loves to accumulate. It loves to gather quotes, concepts, theories, and interpretations. It feels richer with every new paragraph it stores, but this richness is an illusion because it does not feed the inner hunger of the soul. It becomes like a traveler who keeps filling his bag with more maps instead of taking a single step toward the destination. The weight grows heavier, and the journey never begins. In the same way, a person who merely collects knowledge becomes burdened by it, because knowledge without realization is like water carried in a bucket with no intention of drinking it. The heart, however, functions differently. It does not collect. It absorbs. It does not memorize. It experiences. When knowledge enters the heart, it stops being information and becomes illumination. It turns into a light that guides action, softens character, and purifies intention. When a verse is read by the mind understands the structure. When the same verse is absorbed by the heart understands the truth hidden behind the structure. One remains at the level of words, the other touches the level of being. The difference is profound, and it is the difference between a person who knows the path and a person who walks the path. A mind full of texts becomes heavy with opinions, debates, arguments, and claims. It becomes more concerned with correctness than with transformation, more occupied with appearing knowledgeable than with becoming humble, more focused on winning intellectual battles than on conquering the ego. This is the heaviness that grows inside a seeker who confuses reading with awakening. They carry verses the way a donkey carries books, as the old sages used to say, burdened but unchanged. The heart, by contrast, carries nothing yet glows with everything. It has no weight because truth, when integrated, does not sit like a stone. It flows like a breeze through one's actions, speech, presence, and silence. Those who walk the spiritual path eventually discover that God does not look at how much they know, but at how much they have become. He does not ask how many texts they can recite, but how deeply they embody what those texts invite them toward. A person may memorize descriptions of patience yet remain impatient with their family, their neighbors, their own self. They may speak eloquently about trust yet live every day worrying about what has not even happened. They may lecture about surrender while clinging tightly to their own desires. This is the condition of someone whose knowledge never crossed from mind into heart. It remained a theory, a noise, a surface-level ornament. But when knowledge becomes heart-born, everything changes without force. Patience does not need to be performed. It arises naturally. Trust does not need to be argued. It becomes a resting place. Surrender does not feel like sacrifice. It feels like returning to one's true nature. This is the lightness that comes from inner absorption. The person no longer tries to act spiritual. Their being has become spiritual. They no longer speak about God as a distant concept. They speak from a place where God is a lived reality. The heart that absorbs knowledge becomes a mirror reflecting the real. The saints and sages of every age insisted that one line understood through the heart is worth more than 1,000 books stored in the mind. They insisted that true knowledge is not quantity. It is depth. It is not collection. It is transformation. It is not remembering words. It is awakening meaning. A single moment of genuine insight can reshape an entire life, while decades of reading can leave a soul untouched. The seeker must decide which path they want, the path of gathering weight or the path of walking in light. When the heart begins to absorb instead of the mind merely collecting, the seeker feels something subtle shift within them. The ego no longer uses knowledge as a weapon. Pride no longer grows with learning. Humility deepens because the heart understands that every truth comes from heavens beyond its control. The soul softens, the gaze calms, the tongue becomes gentle, and the presence becomes healing. This is the lightness that knowledge brings when it settles not in the head but in the heart. O traveler, understand this. Reality is not what you read, it is what you become. The book is a mirror. It reflects what already exists within you. If the heart is asleep, the text becomes a cage. But if the heart awakens, every word becomes a wing. God does not hide behind pages. He hides behind your own unawareness. What is the benefit of counting pearls you never touch? What is the worth of describing oceans you never enter? The soul does not rise by studying the flight of birds. It rises when it spreads its own wings. Let your knowledge be a lamp, not a prison. Let your learning be a step, not a claim. O seeker, cleanse your heart from the dust of self-importance. Break the idol of I know. Tear the curtain of pride woven by far too many words. Truth does not visit a heart occupied by the noise of its own certainty. Empty yourself so the real may fill you. Silence yourself so the truth may speak through you. Do not be among those who teach the path they have never walked. Be among those who walk until the path teaches them. Do not seek God in books, seek the one who inspired the books. Do not chase meanings, chase the light from which all meanings arise. A mind full of texts may impress the world, but a heart full of reality transforms it. True understanding begins when the seeker stops memorizing truths and starts experiencing them, because there comes a moment in every spiritual journey when words no longer satisfy, when definitions feel empty, and when the heart begins to crave something that no book, no lecture, no scholar can give. You can study the mechanics of fire for years, but you will never know its warmth until you sit before it. You can memorize the shape of the ocean, but you will never know its power until you enter its waters. In the same way, spiritual truths remain distant ideas until the seeker begins to live what they claim to know, until they shift from theory into presence, from recitation into realization. A person may repeat the word trust 1,000 times, but will understand its reality only when they stand in a situation where nothing but trust can carry them. A person may hear countless explanations of surrender, but will meet surrender only when their plans collapse and they choose God's will over their own. A person may memorize every verse about patience, but will taste patience only when life delays them and they remain gentle instead of frustrated. The path of true understanding opens only when life becomes the classroom and the heart becomes the listener. Books introduce the direction, but experience reveals the destination. The tragedy of many seekers is that they become prisoners of repetition. They repeat phrases they have not tasted, they teach ideas they have not digested, and they pretend to understand mysteries they have not even approached. This creates a spiritual dryness, a kind of inner desert where the tongue is full but the soul is empty. The seeker becomes like someone describing a garden while standing outside its walls. They know the names of the flowers, but have never inhaled their fragrance. They know the layout of the paths, but have never walked them. They know the stories of the saints, but have never confronted their own shadows. Real understanding requires entry, stepping inside the experience instead of circling it with words. There is a sweetness in this shift from memorization to experience, a sweetness that cannot be taught, but only tasted. When knowledge begins to move from the mind into the bloodstream of one's life, the seeker notices subtle transformations. They respond to hardship differently, with less fear and more stillness. They speak with more truth and less noise. They begin to see divine hints in everyday events, the whisper of guidance in a delay, the touch of mercy in a loss, the presence of God in a moment of loneliness. This is the kind of understanding that only experience awakens. No amount of reading can replace a single moment of direct witnessing. The saints say that the world was designed as a living scripture, and the seeker who only reads written texts misses the verses unfolding in the sky, in the faces of people, in the turning of events, in the quiet movements of the heart. The seeker who experiences truth begins to see that every joy and every hardship carries a lesson tailored for them. Every encounter becomes a mirror. Every challenge becomes a teacher. Every disappointment becomes a doorway, and every moment becomes a verse in the book of existence. When the seeker begins to read this book with the eyes of the heart, understanding flows effortlessly. Experience also humbles the seeker. When they begin to walk the truth instead of talking about it, they discover how much of their previous knowledge was merely assumption. They discover how easily the ego uses knowledge as a shield. They discover that understanding cannot be claimed. It must be lived. The seeker who experiences truth becomes softer, more compassionate, less judgmental, because they have walked through their own fire. They no longer speak from above others. They speak from within their own transformation. Their words gain weight not because they are many, but because they arise from sincerity. True understanding cannot be separated from presence, and presence is born from experience. When the seeker begins to live the truths they once memorized, they discover that the real journey begins not in the mind, but in the heart. They realize that transformation does not happen through collecting ideas, but through surrendering to the process of being shaped by them. They understand that awakening is not an intellectual achievement, but a lived intimacy with reality. This intimacy grows not through reciting what is true, but through becoming aligned with it. The path of experience is the only path upon which knowledge becomes wisdom, theory becomes light, and the seeker becomes real. The greatest veil between a human and reality is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowing. Because a person who knows they do not know is still open, still searching, still humble, still capable of being guided, while the one who believes they have already arrived closes the door that leads to true discovery. Ignorance is a darkness, but the illusion of knowledge is a darkness pretending to be light, and this makes it far more dangerous for the seeker. When a person thinks they have understood the divine, they stop looking for him. When they believe they have mastered truth, they stop bowing before it. When they imagine they have reached the end of the path, they stop walking, even though the path has barely begun. This illusion often forms in the mind of someone who collects spiritual vocabulary without undergoing spiritual transformation. They become fluent in concepts like ego, surrender, trust, tawhid, fana, but the heart remains untouched by the realities behind these words. The ego loves such knowledge because it can wear these words like ornaments while remaining intact, unchallenged, and untransformed. The person begins to feel enlightened simply because they can speak beautifully, while in reality they remain trapped in the very illusions they describe. They become proud of their humility, arrogant about their spirituality, certain of their uncertainty. This is the veil of false knowing, the greatest illusion of all. True seekers throughout history feared this illusion more than ignorance itself. They preferred being a beginner in the hands of God to being a scholar in the hands of their ego. They understood that the moment you think I understand, the heart stops listening. The moment you think I have arrived, the journey collapses. The moment you think I am someone, the doors of the real close softly, because there is no space for truth in a heart full of itself. The illusion of knowing becomes a cage so subtle that the imprisoned person believes they are free. This illusion shows itself in daily life through judgment, through certainty in one's own perspective, through the inability to listen deeply, and through the refusal to see one's own shadows. A person trapped in false knowing critiques others easily, but rarely looks inward. They analyze everyone's spiritual state except their own. They speak about awakening, yet remain asleep to their own pride. They warn others about ego while holding their own ego close like a treasure. The one who believes they know becomes the harshest guardian of their opinions, because the illusion must protect itself. It cannot afford to be questioned. It cannot tolerate being wrong. But when the illusion begins to crack through hardship, loss, disappointment, or inner confrontation, the seeker discovers something surprising. Not knowing is not a weakness. It is the beginning of wisdom. Uncertainty is not a defect. It is a doorway. Confusion is not a failure. It is the first step toward clarity. Real understanding does not arise from confidence. It arises from surrender. The seeker learns that truth is not a conquest, but a gift. And this gift is offered only to those who remain empty enough to receive it. The illusion of knowing also blocks intimacy with God. When a seeker thinks they already understand divine wisdom, they stop turning to God with sincerity. Their prayers lose depth. Their dhikr becomes mechanical. Their worship becomes habit. They speak of God but do not cry before Him. They read His words but do not tremble. They talk about nearness, but their hearts remain distant. This illusion is a veil because it replaces living connection with dead certainty. It replaces longing with assumption. It replaces humility with self-satisfaction. The real is not found by those who claim Him. He is found by those who seek Him with brokenness, with awe, with a heart emptied of false conclusions. The moment the seeker admits, "I do not know," a new world opens. The heart becomes soft, curious, receptive. Guidance begins to penetrate. Every moment becomes a teacher. Every interaction becomes a mirror. Every hardship becomes an invitation. Every breath becomes a reminder. The seeker stops defending their opinions and begins uncovering their deeper truths. They no longer cling to being right. They yearn to be real. They no longer chase dominance in knowledge. They chase sincerity in being. In this vulnerability, the divine mystery flows closer, because there is nothing blocking its way. The greatest veil has always been the illusion of knowing, not the absence of knowledge. When the illusion dissolves, the heart becomes a space where reality can finally reveal itself. The seeker returns to innocence, and in that innocence, they discover the truth that had been hidden behind their certainty all along. Books point the way, but only a transformed heart can walk into the presence behind the words, because every written page is a signpost, not a destination. Anyone can read about light, but only the heart that has been polished by sincerity can reflect it. Anyone can study the map, but only the one who has journeyed inward can arrive at the land the map describes. A book can show you where the door is, but only an awakened heart can open it. This is why so many become experts in religious texts yet remain strangers to the one those texts speak about. They gather information but never approach intimacy. They understand description but never taste reality, thinking they have arrived simply because they know the vocabulary of the path. The heart, unlike the mind, undergoes a transformation that makes it capable of receiving presence. It must be emptied of noise, ego, pride, and assumptions before it can become the vessel of divine light. The mind can analyze spiritual concepts, but the heart must embody them. The mind can memorize qualities of the real, but the heart must bow to the real. The mind can debate meanings, but the heart must dissolve in meaning. This is why revelation came to the heart of the prophet, not to his intellect alone. The divine does not enter through analysis, but through surrender. The mind may know the teachings, but the heart must be reshaped by them until the teachings become one's nature rather than merely one's knowledge. A person may read countless books about humility, remain immersed in their own importance. They may study compassion yet respond to people with harshness. They may learn about trust yet panic at every uncertainty. This disconnect appears because the heart has not yet transformed. The knowledge remains external. It floats on the surface of the mind like oil on water, never mixing, never entering the deeper layers of the self. Books cannot walk for you, cannot purify you, cannot dissolve your ego. They can only point, reminding you of what must happen within. The inner journey is walked by the heart alone, and until the heart begins to change, the seeker remains at the doorstep no matter how many texts they have mastered. The mistake many spiritual students make is believing that understanding is transformation, but understanding is merely the invitation. Transformation is the acceptance. A book might teach you the concept of surrender, but life will teach you surrender itself when your own plans collapse and you find yourself choosing God's will over your own. A book may explain the nature of patience, but true patience forms in your heart when you stand in delay without complaint. A book may describe nearness to God, but nearness occurs only when your heart becomes soft enough, empty enough, present enough to sense Him in every breath. The text gives the direction. The heart walks through the terrain. The transformed heart is not merely informed, it is awakened. It becomes sensitive to subtle guidance, able to recognize signs that the mind would ignore. It sees meaning in events that seem ordinary, hears divine hints in everyday conversations, and experiences God's presence not as a theory, but as a living reality.